The great deal maker has made another deal. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Bill, President Trump, lauded over his career for his ability to make deals, lauded mostly by himself for that matter, has made another deal, this time with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, to avoid defaulting on the national debt and to expand the government's ability to borrow for the next couple of years. The deal also avoids what is familiarly known on Capitol Hill as sequestration, which is a set of mandatory spending cuts that go into effect if deals cannot be made. Bill, this did not actually have the tremendous ring of conservative victory to it now, did it?
No, it did not. And I have to tell you, this is not to defend it or any of it. But I want to say about a year ago, maybe a little longer, I did some research onto the size of the actual debt, not just the deficit, the debt. And when I saw how much money $22 trillion was, it's something like 18 or 19 World Trade Centers made out of $100 bills. When I realized the magnitude of this, and when I realized the idea that the government would ever be able to run the kind of surpluses necessary to pay this down, even if the economy were to grow dramatically, which we expect it probably will, I have come to realize a while ago, Scott, I don't know if this is just a retreat or whether it's just a psychological defense mechanism or what. But certainly money does not mean what it used to mean. And when you get to the kind of numbers we are at, 25, 26, 27, what I'm basically saying is every dollar that gets added to the debt is bad, and I'm against it. Needless to say, we should be under balanced budget and we should be paying this debt off. But since we're not, it makes me wonder what the difference between owing $27 billion and $27 trillion and $27.5 trillion is. I don't know what's going on. And I'd feel a lot better if I thought the people that did know what was going on knew what was going on. But I don't think anybody knows what's going on. I don't think anybody understands the territory we are in now. This debt will never, ever, ever be repaid, ever. And I don't know what happens in the case of a default, and I don't know if the default ever happens. On some level, it's starting to seem to me like this is some sort of it's almost like, it's not even like new math, Scott. It's like learning a new language. It's like everything we used to think about money, doesn't mean anything anymore.
What you're saying right there, Bill, actually echoes something that I heard in a little snippet from Jim Cramer, financial analyst on CNBC, who basically said in response to the word that this deal had been struck, well, good, now we can move on. That's out of the way for a couple of years, and it's a phony issue anyway. He may not have used the word phony, but the upshot of it was that's what it was. It's not really an issue at all, and let's move on.
Well, let me tell you, I had a bit of an insight on this, again, about a year or two ago, and it doesn't excuse any of this, and it doesn't exonerate us from what's likely to happen, but it does explain why things have gotten this bad and why they can probably continue to get a little worse. It dawned on me that the amount of money that is owed is not the issue. The issue are the payments on the interest of the money that's owed being made. That's the issue. And right now, I don't know what our percentage of our federal budget is dedicated to interest on the debt. But if I had to guess, I would say that this Ponzi scheme is going to continue until the interest on the debt becomes unmanageable and unbearable. It gets bigger every year. But as a percentage of the total budget, I honest to God don't remember. I want to say it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 6-7%, something like that. It may be more than that. It may be considerably more than that for all I know. But what I realized is that no one's going to call these chips in until the perception that they're not getting their interest payments is met. And that is how we've been able to go this far into the weeds and continue to go further into the weeds. And as always, with the kind of cowards that generally speaking tend to run to politics, as long as it doesn't happen to them and as long as they can get reelected and as long as spending money gets them reelected, I don't think they much care.
Well, if this is any kind of a genius deal that President Trump has made, it's hard to see the outlines of it at this point. Immediately after the announcement that this was going to happen, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer released a joint statement, and I'm reading here, reporting from CNBC, joint statement that's saying that they're pleased that the administration, quote, has finally agreed to join Democrats in ending these devastating cuts. And again, later on, they say, with this agreement, we can avoid the damage of sequestration and continue to advance progress for the people. So, Bill, it's not only avoiding the potential threat of defaulting on our debt. What the Democrats are really crowing about here is the fact that the legislation that was put in place to ensure a responsible budgetary process in Congress has been defeated forever.
Yes, and prior to these latest series of continuing resolutions and so on and so forth and so on and so forth, I remember Graham Rudman's spending limits designed to cap the amount of spending in any given year so that the deficit remained under control. And those were simply just ignored. And what we have, Scott, is a situation that goes back to the beginning of time. And I am sure that the first caveman politician did exactly this. He basically said, look, you put me in charge of all of the shells here, and I'll make sure that you get your shells and we get your shells, and I'll keep some shells for myself. But what we are talking about now no longer conforms to reality. And on some level, it is almost a relief. I'm not happy about this, and I'm not trying to make excuses for it or any of that stuff. I'm only telling you some of the stories I hear, and the one that I hear the most often and bothers me the most is the idea that that the United States Navy has significant number of its total ships in dry dock for repairs, and they cannot afford to get them repaired because we gave up the ability to have the Navy repair our own naval ships, and we contracted that out to the civilian sector. And what I heard a 3-star admiral tell me was that he cannot get these ships, the maintenance on these ships done, because it is a multi-million-dollar job per ship, needless to say. The civilian contractor is going to need to hire on a certain number of people, which means that contractor needs a guarantee of payment, and the admiral cannot promise him anything because he doesn't have a budget for the year. He may have a budget for 3 months or 6 months or something like that. What do you say about this? I just don't understand it. I'd like to be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. We have two different things that are clearly going on here. Okay, repaying this debt is out of the question. I think in order for us to repay the debt, we'd have to run surpluses of, $500 billion a year for 40 years. Not going to happen. There's no way that American people are going to pay $400 billion in additional taxes, or 10 for that matter.
Well, Bill, some people have pointed out, especially on the left, that what you just brought up is a key issue. In addition to the fact that the Trump administration has done nothing significant to reduce spending, the fact that the Trump administration cut taxes has reduced revenue and therefore is causing part of this crisis. This plan, by the way, authorizes an additional $320 billion in spending in 2020. And Bill, it seemed to me like nothing more than a bunch of politicians getting together in Washington and saying, we don't want to talk about this during the election season, so let's just cut a deal.
Sure. And I think when all of this comes due, most of the people who are responsible for what's going to happen will have been in their graves for quite a while, which is a shame. Because it would be fun to carry them around on rails covered with tar and chicken feathers and show them people eating, rats on burning sticks over tires in the street.
And let me just clarify for people who are first-time listeners to this program, I don't want to get the wrong idea. Bill meant literal tar and chicken feathers.
Oh, no, I didn't mean tar. No, I meant literal tar
That's
and
right.
feathers.
I don't want anybody to think that was a rhetorical.
No. And I say we save money and get the lowest quality tar we can find. But I'm not joking about this. Scott, there are two possibilities going forward, okay? I think, three. You either reduce the debt down to a manageable number by paying the debt down. I think that is out of the question. I just don't think it's emotionally, physically possible. I think that option has gone a long time ago. Nobody really can understand how much money $25 trillion is, and that doesn't include the unfunded liabilities and all the rest of it. So option one, paying the debt down, seems to me to be off the table. Option two is that we have entered an age where money as we understand money doesn't exist anymore. That this idea of money representing something that is held and traded and so on is out the window. I don't believe that this is the case. I don't think you can do magic like that, but occasionally I think that money, which used to be a medium of exchange of value, is now more than anything. It's just almost like a lubricant. It's like a something to keep these wheels spinning. So number two option is that it turns out that you can pull this kind of thing off and keep doing it forever. And the third option is that you can't. And when that happens, nobody knows what's going to happen. But we do know that during the Great Depression, when money lost its value, something like 50 or some significant percentage, 40-50% of the people in the country lived on farms. Many of them had dirt floors, no electricity. It's going to be a bit of a reach for people to go back to those standards in 2025 or whatever the case may be. But I don't know what to say about the debt other than to say, if you were to ask me which is more likely, that humans have found a new way to think about money that has nothing to do with ownership and all the rest of the things that debt implies, or that the people making these decisions are full aware of the consequences of these decisions and have decided that it's not going to happen on their watch, and so since it's not going to happen to them, they don't care. If I had to pick which one of those two is more likely, I'm going to go with B.
Bill, it's not just the debt as we've been talking about here. It's the fact that sequestration is essentially a debt issue now, the mandatory spending cuts. I mean, that was the only halter that we had on runaway federal spending, was the ability to do that sequestration, which that's dead now.
It never worked. It was kabuki. And it's
correct.
been kabuki.
And then spending has, of course, also increased. And all of this in a deal made, essentially a closed-door deal made with a handshake at this point until the legislation gets passed, which it certainly will through the House and likely to pass in the Senate. I guess it brings this final question, Bill. Is the idea of fiscal conservatism dead?
Well, the idea is not dead, Scott. The execution, the actual implementation of it, seems to have died 40, 50 years ago.
Is it dead as a rhetorical political issue now? Like if any candidate gets on the stump and starts speaking about the fact that the government needs to spend less and be responsible with our debt and have mandatory triggers of spending cuts, don't we just laugh him off the platform?
Yes, and rightfully so. And to the degree that what you're talking about in terms of how we have handled this issue of spending, whether that the rhetoric of that is dead, I think it is dead. What the country needs before an absolute catastrophe happens is it's going to require a politician with the courage and the persuasiveness to sit down and tell the American people the truth of things. And one of the first things you have to tell the truth about is when somebody says that we have avoided these budget cuts, it does not mean that the amount of money that was being spent on Social Security, let's say, has been cut. It means that the amount of the increase has been cut.
The projection of the increase.
Correct. So when they talk about budget cuts, it's a lie. The term is a lie. It's like, oh, Donald Trump is trying to just take a name. Richard Nixon, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Obama, it doesn't matter. Insert name here is trying to cut the budget. They're not trying to cut the budget. They're trying to cut the rate of growth of the budget. There's not, that I've been aware of, anything that ever simply said, no, you're going to get less money than you got last year. NASA is still, I don't know what they're making, $13-14 billion a year. It's same as what they were making in 2006 in terms of real dollars. probably more. And in 2006, they had 3 or 4 space vehicles that were going up into orbit 5 or 6, 7, 8 times a year. And somebody's going to have to explain that to me, because I don't really understand how you have to spend the same amount of money to not fly people into space as you do to actually fly them into space. The only person who has the chance to get us out of this would be somebody who had the courage and the persuasiveness to basically sit down and say to the American people, which means the people of the world, this is where we are, this is where we're heading, and we have a choice of either making sacrifices for 40 years or losing 70 or 80% of the population of the earth. Those are the choices in front of us. And I find it interesting, by the way, just in closing, that people like Al Gore, for example, and all of the Democrats and all of the progressives are talking about global warming as the end of mankind, the end of civilization as we know it, when in point of fact, the predictions that were made in 2005 certainly haven't happened 15 years later. But these are the same people who are enthusiastically, the same people who are calling for emission controls and we got to do something about the planet's temperature. These are the very same people who are accelerating the one thing that can actually genuinely cause the collapse of human civilization on the earth, and that is a complete breakdown of the financial system. I find that a little disturbing.
Bill, let me ask a follow-up, and we can end it here. But you describe this person who essentially would rise up and be a truth teller and be persuasive. We don't expect that person, as you've indicated, to come from the political class. And so for years, the idea was that such a man or woman was going to come out of the private sector. Well, here we elected a guy who allegedly is a master business manager, who is a great leader, negotiator, cost cutter, and we've gotten only more spending, more debt, and frankly, deals with the other party that would have, that if any Republican candidate had run on that, would have lost a primary in a landslide.
And we don't have a wall either.
Well, I was going to do that episode, but I was looking. Let's bring it up, because we're not going to do that as a separate episode. I just read a story today that said that all of the wall that has been built during the Trump administration is merely replacing dilapidated sections of the existing wall, that we have not extended the wall on the southern border by a single mile. Now, whatever you think of that issue, these two things were core to the president's candidacy.
Correct. And I'm willing to do a little bit of apologetics on the wall only because what Donald Trump has done with regard to illegal immigration has basically told Mexico, you're responsible for controlling the flood of people coming up through the country. And if Mexico closes its southern border, a lot of that problem goes away. So people talk about a wall because they want to stop illegal immigration. If illegal immigration is stopped or significantly decreased by means other than the wall, then I think the actual intent of what people wanted is met, or at least it's being addressed. Let's put it that way. It's certainly being addressed, and it's being addressed in fashions that I haven't seen.
Is there an analog to that on the spending side of the argument?
No, there is not. Not at all. Not that I have seen, not at all. You know, the one thing that people need to understand in terms of hope is simply this. If we were to say, all right, you just got another $350 billion, that's your budget for 2020. If we were to say we are going to freeze that budget at 2020, that is the amount of money that we are going to spend from now on until the debt is gone. If you had the courage to simply say, no more cuts, you got all these extra benefits, it's just this amount of money, which is pushing $4 trillion, is all that we will have for our lifetime and the lifetime of our children, then there would be some hope, because then the economy could grow itself out of the debt. The economy could essentially, the national debt in 1863 was $550 million. And I'm sorry, that wasn't the debt, that was the total budget, beg your pardon. And that included running the Civil War. And $550 million in 1863 was an incredible sum of money. Today, $550 million is a check for over lunch from a couple of people. So it is possible to grow your way out of this debt, but you can't grow your way out of the debt if the debt keeps growing as fast or faster than your economy is growing. And I think that the only way to sell this to the American people is to say, everybody says they don't want cuts. Fine. There are not going to be any more cuts, but there's not going to be any additional spending either. This amount of money that we're spending now, this is it. Make it work. And if it turns out that your agency is going under because you don't have enough money, then you need to find a way to lean your agency down so that you can continue on what you're getting, because this is all you're getting. And if you want to go to the trouble of shutting down a government agency and saving $13 billion by eliminating NASA or whatever the case may be, EPA, whatever, then yeah, you can divvy up the rest of that money all you want to. But the $4 trillion is all you get, period. Under circumstances like that, it's the only way I can conceive of, psychologically, for this to have any chance of succeeding. And I suspect, Scott, and we saw it in the financial crisis in 2008, and we saw it with the savings and loan crisis. We've seen it all over. We've seen it with the collapse of Rome and all the rest of this stuff. I suspect that everybody knows that this catastrophe is coming, and that as long as it doesn't happen tomorrow or today, then it's not really my problem. And the people who are going to suffer for this, if this in fact happens, should be able to have gone back to those people and torn them to little tiny shreds, but they're not going to be able to.
Well, that's an awful thing to do to Grandma. You know that.
If Grandma was Speaker of the House of Representatives, she would have deserved it. And I'm not talking about the citizens.
I'm talking about
the
us.
Politicians. I'm talking about the politicians.
Who elected them?
Well, there you go. See, better answer.
Ladies and gentlemen, 5 days a week, Bill Whittle speaks the truth to power from time-tested principles. It is nothing new. It's nothing sexy. It just works. And unfortunately, so few on Capitol Hill are listening, but our members are listening, and they want to fund these conversations. That's why they become members at BillWhittle.com by clicking that Become a Member link, so that these kind of conversations can be multiplied around the world, so that people around the world who have already thought these thoughts that we're expressing here before they hear them from us can find out that they're not actually insane, and that there are others who think that way. If you'd like to become one of those people, if you're one of those who think that way and would like some fellow liberty lovers to run with, we invite you to become part of the membership at BillWhittle.com. Thank you to the members for making this possible. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott.